you can order prasad, from Pune and have it delivered to Bangalore and things like that. All of that are actually happening on ONDC. If I can order in Gujarati and somebody picking up the order in Tamil, we don't have that sort of an interoperability as much as the society has it in the physical world. My whole thinking then goes from how do I acquire the customer before I sell my catalog to saying I don't even need to worry about acquiring a customer. So consumer actually has greater range of choices of discounts to look at rather than locking in on, okay, this particular app offers this discount.
Welcome to India Innovates, a podcast where we dive into the stories of innovators shaping the future from the heart of India. I'm Vaishnavi.
And I'm Shrinath. Together, we'll explore cutting-edge ideas and breakthrough technologies that are transforming communities, industries, and lives across the globe.
Whether it's a revolutionary startup, a pioneering researcher, or a visionary corporate leader, if they are innovating from India or for India, you'll hear about their stories here.
We'll also delve into the ecosystem that supports them, from the regulations and policies to the contributions of large companies that drive innovation at scale.
Let's uncover how India's unique environment is fostering a wave of creativity and ingenuity.
Hear stories of challenges, triumphs, and inspirations that have driven these changemakers to create and disrupt.
This is India Innovates, where innovation meets inspiration and India takes the center stage. Today, we are speaking with Sujith Nair, who's been instrumental in developing Beckn protocol.
The Beckn protocol is the underlying protocol of ONDC, an open, decentralized marketplace which is driving innovation in the e-commerce sector in India.
Let's hear it from Sujith on India Innovates. Welcome to India Innovates, Sujith.
Thank you, Vaishnavi. Thanks, Shrinath. Wonderful to be here.
Right. Digital India has reached its escape velocity, right, with Aadhaar and UPI, and recently ONDC. And you being one of the co-authors of Beckn protocol. Tell us a little bit about how the whole journey is happening.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey. Been a privilege for me to be part of the early motions of this big wheel of digital transformation that India is going through, starting with Aadhaar, and been lucky to be part of that journey. I think as a continuation of that, it's somewhere in 2018, later part of 2018, when we thought of this idea of creating Beckn protocol, which for me is, in simple terms, is essentially a language of how digital economy should operate, especially the transaction market side of the digital economy, between an interaction between any consumer and provider. Beckn protocol was an effort to create a bunch of open standards, which is what the Beckn protocol is, that will enable innovators, technology players to use it to sort of amplify the opportunity, amplify access for expanding markets, making it more inclusive, especially for small businesses and consumers aside, giving them more choice. So that was the effort. Fundamentally, it's nothing but a bunch of open standards as a language for machines to understand economic transactions. And that sort of is the idea behind what ONDC is about, or what probably you would have heard of Namayatri and others. But that's been what the Beckn story is, and it's been a great run, thankfully, and there's a lot more to be done. We're just getting started.
So Sujit, help us understand. You've used the term open multiple times.
Yes.
Now, when I'm not able to imagine what's an open network versus what's a regular network. Say, if I take an e-commerce, how is it different from a Flipkart or an Amazon?
Great question. So openness comes from the way we look at a consumer-provider interact in any digital medium. I can take you back to some of the examples of what open networks that are there already in our lives for last several decades. And if I had to just give the example of emails, when you're using email, let's say, Srinath, you're using Hotmail and I'm using Gmail, you don't expect me to be on Hotmail to receive an email from you or me to send an email. We have choices to be on any email platform and yet exchange emails. And Vaishnavi can completely on a different email platform. Similarly with mobile phones, you could be on Airtel, I could be on Vodafone, and we can still make calls. I don't expect to carry another Airtel connection just to speak with you. So openness comes from the fact that you have these choices to have any digital interface for that purpose, whether it's email, communications, or even internet for that matter. You can use any browser to access any website. That is what I meant by openness. Now, how do I bring that idea of open networks into commerce? And how is this therefore a departure from the way of thinking of the design of Amazon or Uber or an Airbnb, is that you don't want to have consumer and provider to be on the same platform.
Right.
Like email, a consumer could be on any platform, let's say my everyday app like WhatsApp for that matter, and the seller or the provider is on some other platform, unbeknownst to the consumer. But is there a way for the consumer to discover the seller and their catalog of goods and services without having to be on the same platform? Which kind of asks, do you need somebody in the middle, plonking that platform and bringing consumer and provider on board to the same platform?
Right.
That, for me, essentially is open. And therefore, once you have more than one platform where the consumer and providers are, you're fundamentally creating a network. It's not one thing, it's many nodes speaking to each other, and therefore the network. So that's what we mean by open networks. ONDC is essentially open network for digital commerce, with that idea that it's not one central platform. In fact, it's not even a platform. It's a network that makes many platforms. Somebody brings the seller, somebody brings the provider, and somebody else can bring the logistic provider to fulfill that sale that happened, and somebody else is bringing financial services. So all these are different nodes, and not everything happening on one platform.
Right.
And that's the big departure.
Just to illustrate with an example, how do we visualize this, right?
Yeah.
What's the interface? What does the interface look like? What does the customer journey look like?
Yeah.
If I'm watching something, if I come across a QR code, ONDC QR code, where does my journey start?
Yeah.
As a customer, how do I interact with that interface? Do I need an app? Do I need to log on to a certain portal? Do I need to be a logged in user? How does it work both from a customer face and who are fulfilling the supply and everybody in between?
Great question, and I think it's important that we bring the customer's view of how do you interact with such technologies. So for the email, just to go back to that example, you never said, I want to access an email network. You just said, okay, let me get on some email platform, whether it's a Gmail or a Hotmail. So you're registering on that platform and then sending out emails to whoever it is on different platforms with a different email ID. Similarly, with Beckn protocol and the networks that emerge with it, like ONDC, you're expected to have some app on your phone. It could be your everyday apps like a Paytm or a browser. The idea is that you spend your time on that app. Maybe you're already a registered user on that, or you get to be a registered user there, and then you start searching for what you want.
Okay.
If you're looking for a packet of bread or a ride to go from, say, from Kurmangla to airport, you're just searching there, and you're assuming that the app does its job.
Right.
It is the app that figures out how to connect with this network, which has other platforms where some of these service providers, these sellers are available, and sort of have conversation, find what you're looking for through the rich catalog that is available, and make it available back on that app for the user. So for user, for the consumer, it's still the same app. You wouldn't know the difference between an Amazon app and an app that is connecting to ONDC in terms of how you're doing the search, how the options are getting enlisted for you, how do you pick one of those options, add it to the cart, and go through the process. It doesn't change. It looks pretty much the same. So for an end user, I don't think they would, ONDC as an idea would be fairly transparent, like how internet is transparent.
So, in a sense, does it mean that brands or apps such as these have the power to now become super apps in a certain sense, where they're able to do a lot more without really investing a lot on infrastructure?
I get this question a lot. I think the short answer is yes, because think about it. If you have a lot of consumers on your platform, or if you have a lot of providers on your platform, whichever side you take it from, it is possible for you to cater to multiple needs of your user by connecting to the network and making the rich catalogs, diverse set of catalogs available. So you end up, in the eyes of your user, becoming a super app.
So then how does a novelty factor come in? If everybody is able to do everything as a service provider, why would I install, say, a Paytm versus any other app?
Vaishnavi, before I talk about novelty, I think there's a few important things about the super app aspect, okay?
Right.
And I want to separate super app versus superpower app in the sense that I'm the only one who can bring all of this.
Okay.
It also talks about the novelty or the lack of it. But I think what we're trying to do is that as a consumer, do you have access to choices? Can one app do a job of giving you access better than the other? At the same time, does that app control everything that I access? And that's the only thing that I'm left to deal with tomorrow. And suddenly, for some reason, I don't want to use that app and move on to another one. Do I have the choice? So we don't want this whole of digital commerce or digital economy to be a species of one, especially for the scale like we're dealing with India, where you have 1.4 billion people. I don't think one app can cut it for all. And the numbers kind of indicate that, where you only have about 7 to 8% of commerce to be online. B2B is even small, it's abysmal. So my sense is if you have to reach everybody and leave no one behind at that scale, like probably what UPI did, it is important to have super app, but not just one super app, because I don't think that notion, that pursuit will get us that scale. Point number one. Point number two, in terms of differentiation, it's very important that I separate the novelty and the experience from the access.
Okay.
You need to solve for access, which is why we're calling it democratization of access, or in putting in simple terms, open up the access. At the same time, consumers need a better experience with that access. So experience is where the novelty comes. As much as the fact that an infrastructure, a network like ONDC opens up access uniformly, equally for all, for any app, it still doesn't mean it's going to be easy for a consumer to navigate such a richness of choices and catalogs in a way that is not contextually relevant for him. So how do I make it contextually easy for you? For example, depending on if you're looking for a ride, are you looking for a ride to run to catch a flight and you're getting late, or you're catching a ride to get to an exam and you don't want to miss that exam or be on time for the exam, or you want to just take a casual weekend trip? The three different cares, still one need, which is mobility, but how do you recognize what's relevant for me and cater to that need is an experience innovation spectrum that people can compete on. Similarly, the combinations of it. For example, I would like to go for a movie, but also solve for not eating outside but coming home to having food delivered. So how do I manage all of that in one app? Going out for a movie, don't want to deal with the traffic, so I want to have my ride organized, and while I come back, I have food delivered at home so that I don't have to wait too much. If I have to do all of this, how do I combine all of this in a way that the app understands my needs in a unique way, rather than me opening 3 different apps to do the same thing? So there is that element of novelty from experience that is still, I think, a chase for many, the likes of Paytms or any app builder to do that. It does not at the same time mean that that novelty means you exercise control on how the consumer finds access to all of this. So there are 2 vectors to this approach.
So if I had to put this differently, tell me if I've understood this right.
Yes, please.
I'm a service provider, I'm a Kirana provider, or I'm a taxi driver. Today, if I had to list on a platform, I'd go to one platform, I'd list on that one platform.
As a provider, yeah.
As a provider. And I have to wait for them to find consumers for me.
That's right.
Right? That's how it works today.
Yeah.
Right? So the only thing I'm competing with everyone else is probably on price or on access. If I have an SKU and some consumers looking, if no one else has it, I get that. Otherwise, if I'm closer, there might be some metrics.
Right.
But it's defined by whoever's built the app on top of it. What you're trying to do is coming back and saying, hey, you could list in one, but you show up in multiple places.
That's right.
Right? So like a service provider, I could list on, say, a Paytm, but tomorrow if there's a new app that comes up, and they just want to come back and say, okay, how do I enable SKU discovery when it comes to FMCG? Without my having to do anything, I would automatically list on that app.
Yeah.
So to me, I start getting orders, and I really don't care which is the app which is built on top.
That is
Right?
right.
Is that a fair assumption?
It is, and it's a great example. Thanks, Sri, for actually simplifying it for me. So the way to think about it is that my job is to get online as a provider.
Yeah.
Make sure my best of my catalog, best of my inventory is visible out there in the digital world, just like how it's visible nicely in my shelf in a physical store.
Yeah.
Now, do I really care about how customer finds me? In the sense that, do I have to onboard the customer onto the same place where I'm listing my catalog? Or can customer be present on any other app and they're spending a lot of time online, yet discover my catalog? So can my catalog find its way to where the customer is, rather than trying to make the customer come to my catalog? So it's just a flip of that perspective. What it means is, my whole thinking then goes from how do I acquire the customer before I sell my catalog to saying I don't even have to worry about acquiring a customer. Just make my catalog visible where the customer's need is sort of emerging or the intent is emerging, and let the customer find me there, my catalog there, and let's do that. It could be on so for example, I could be on a Go Frugal sort of a seller app if I'm a restaurant, or if a Growth Falcon sort of an app if I'm a restaurant, making myself available there. But the customer may not be on Growth Falcon app. It's a small app, probably they don't want to spend a lot of money on customer acquisition, but the seller is on Paytm or on Magic Pen, and they find me there. So this is the point I was trying to say about both consumer and provider not being on same platform actually unlocks doors to think of how do you solve for making business without having to worry about these huge cost barriers of customer acquisition, retention, etc.
So if I had to draw a parallel, for instance, if I'm an FMCG company and I'm making shampoos, for instance, I ideally want a customer segment. Now today, if I'm one company, the way the physical network is structured is I need to own the entire distribution. So I'll come back. The customer says, hey, I see an ad, I like your product, where can I buy it? But if I could make provisions to say you could walk into a modern trade, you could walk into a Kirana store, you can go online, all these are different ways for you to consume the same product. It's just where do you find it? Now what you're doing is something similar in the digital space, but I don't need to invest in building the distribution.
That is right.
What I do is I come back and say, I focus on building the best product I can, I focus on delivering the best service I can, and I say, okay, I've listed on ONDC, and now these are the sort of customers. Now, no matter what the customer wants, and if she's a customer, she says, okay, I've heard about you somewhere, where can I find you? She's not locked into one channel. She can go into any app and she says, hey, this looks interesting, can I buy? So it's not just an ad, she can complete the transaction and I can service her.
So clarify, just one more question in addition to that. So for example, I'm constantly trying to imagine how the interface looks. I think that becomes a visual start point for a lot of people. So how does it different from, say, a marketplace that is there? Sellers are there in various marketplaces, example, an Amazon or a Flipkart, right? And similarly, like Meeshos of the world. So ONDC, does it become one more layer on top of it?
Yeah, but you have to go.
How do
I
you?
think you have to go back to Flipkart. Here, you don't have to go to Flipkart.
Yeah.
Go to any
So
of
Yeah, correct. So how does
Let's-
ONDC
yeah.
become a
Good point.
platform within which again Amazon has its own option, Flipkart has its own option, and then probably there's a price war. Then I decide whether I want to procure
Yeah.
from this guy or that
Sure.
guy. How does that work?
So let's roll this with an example.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say that you're looking for the shampoo.
Yeah.
As Shrinath was suggesting. How do you start? Maybe you saw an ad in the paper,
Okay.
or you probably saw it in between an IPL match on TV.
Mhm.
That's where sort of the need surfaces, right? Now, from there, what do you do? So typically, when you look at the ad, you can say, okay, buy it in the nearest Kirana store, or it's available on this
Right.
websites. And once you move on, it says, oh, Flipkart. Oh, do I have a Flipkart app? Have I registered? Do I have money payment cards
Okay,
added
sure,
to that?
sure.
Or Amazon or any other app. That's how you typically think.
Right.
What will change with ONDC from that side is this. Imagine your ad has now a QR code.
Okay.
Okay? The moment you see a QR code, you intuitively think of opening your camera and scanning it.
Correct.
That's all that you need.
Correct.
So when you open the camera and scan the QR code, you're not worried about which app
Sure.
or anything. This QR code will tell you the apps which are already sort of connected to ONDC. You don't have to know. Let's say you
Okay.
didn't even know
Okay.
ONDC.
Okay.
It'll show you 4 or 5 apps, and when you open it up, it is not showing that ad again. It's saying, okay, for this ad, moment you search, it'll tell you, oh, this, let's say this is shampoo, Head and Shoulders. You can find it in 5 Kirana stores in your neighborhood, in your very specific neighborhood. You could be in HSR layout, or you could be in some part of Gurgaon, and you can find the stores for you in the neighborhood. That's one. And not just find, I can actually go ahead and place the order. So that idea of you not having to take the cognitive load of figuring out which app, and then using only that particular app to find it, suddenly has changed to something else. And that can happen only if the marketer who's making that ad and making it available, the inventory holder, which could be a physical store or an online dark store or a marketplace, all of them are getting connected to this way of thinking and doing. It makes my experience that much more richer as a consumer without getting into this challenges of which app do I download for which particular service. Neither is the FMCG company or the provider saying, oh, which is the app that consumer is likely to use, and therefore I should go get listed there.
Yeah.
So it takes away all those frictions away and makes me saying it doesn't matter. Consumer will find me. If I have an ad, if the consumer can find my ad, they'll find my product.
But tell me something. I want to come back to a very realistic way of shopping,
Sure.
right? Because a shampoo is a shampoo, right? We, for whatever reasons, we finalize that we want to buy a shampoo.
Right.
Now, being in the value segment, it's a shampoo, right? Now, if I know that Swiggy on Instamart is giving me, say, 15% discount versus the Kirana shop it's at MRP, assume why would I want to go to a Kirana store?
Sure.
I mean, why would I want it to be picked up when, at least from a tier 1 perspective, where an Instamart or any dark store can give it to me in 10 minutes or lesser?
Sure.
Yeah.
You want me to take a stab at it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So no, let's go with this sort of a discount shopping
Sure.
as one of the motivations, incentives for people.
And also the speed.
and speed.
Right.
Great.
This is from a tier 1. We
Sure.
will probably go
Got
into
it.
tier 2 and tier 3.
My sense is that will continue to happen. It could even flourish on this ONDC model.
Right.
The difference, however, is that it's not one player offering discount on one app. It is anybody, including the FMCG who's selling the brand, or the seller, or the platform on which the seller is hosted, or the platform on which the consumer is hosted. Now the discount can come from any of them.
Right.
And all the discounts, no matter where they are set up, is visible to the consumer. So consumer actually has greater range of choices of discounts to look at, rather than locking in on, okay, this particular app offers this discount. You can see multiple of that. And that's what will open up. In fact, it's not just discount. Somebody else will say, oh, by the way, I can get you shampoo and 10 other items in the basket and offer you a better discount on the basket size, which is my own offering as an end user app. So it's a Paytm's offering and not actually the offering of the seller or the FMCG. So those combinatorial value additions, whether in the form of discounts or any other form of incentives, will show up. It's not confined to just one person thinking of offering the discount. Today, I think that options are sort of limited or gated or controlled by these centralized marketplaces. You're opening it up.
So again, tell me if I understand this right. So it's almost like if I'm a consumer and I want this mug,
Yeah.
right? Today my journey is, hey, is it available on Flipkart? Is it available on Amazon? And I start with a platform.
Yeah.
You're saying start with the product.
That's right.
I like the product. I will start with the product. I can scan a QR code on this, and what you show me is 5 different places where it's listed. Absolutely. Now there, I could come back and say, hey, Amazon for Prime customers is showing a 10% discount. I'm a Prime member. I will go through Amazon, no problem.
Yes.
But if my Kirana store doesn't have a discount, but anyway, I've got a large basket with him, I want to buy from there. Yeah. The choice is mine.
Yes.
So what you're freeing me is to make a choice about where I want to buy this, by starting with the product and not the platform.
Yes.
So, yeah, is it fair?
So yeah, absolutely. So let me take this.
Just one more addition to that.
Sure.
Is that a real problem? What is the real problem that we are trying to
Sure.
solve? Is this more of a convenience or is this more of a problem?
I'll come to that problem as well. So let's take this example. I'm a girl child in a remote part of a village, and I think my parents mustered enough money to get me a laptop.
Okay.
Okay. Now the questions, as you mentioned, do I first figure out the app where I can buy online, or should I search for where I can buy laptop? So what if you are product and intent first and not platform first in our thinking? That freedom, what does it lead to? That freedom says, okay, I'm looking for a laptop. Now you're searching for a laptop, you suddenly discover there are 3 more platforms like Amazon, which actually cater better to my city, which I didn't know, or to my region. More importantly, I'll also figure out in my search, when I search for laptop, there is probably a local cooperative which can offer me a consumer product insurance or a loan, which I did not find it on one app. So this opportunities that open up because you're on one unified network of platforms and not viewing the portal only through one platform and the choices they offer sort of expands. Now imagine if this network exists, maybe tomorrow there will be a bank which says that I can offer you a loan, or government will say I can offer you a subsidy for you to buy that from the market, or I can offer you an insurance, or I can offer you a 3 years warranty as a top up, or I can have it to you delivered the same day because I have an inventory locally. Maybe there is a extended dealer of that laptop available in the neighborhood. All of those are signals you did not get.
Okay.
And now you're making those signals available. Somebody is going to tie it up. Your experience provider will now say that, oh, there are multiple in which I can offer what is the best choice. It's a contextually best choice. It's not always the price. That coming together of those signals and unifying them to offer an experience is what will be different with ONDC.
So I can also see the lot of benefits for the brand. Because the brand, what I need to do is I need to tie up distribution with multiple players and offer specific discounts on that, platform discounts.
That's right.
But what you're trying to say is if I'm a large brand, if I'm a Dell or if I'm an Apple or so, I'm actually saying, hey, listen, there is this product here. There are multiple ways you can buy. I can choose because I'm not bound by how much of marketing money a particular platform puts in attracting a customer because they're listing my product with 10 other products.
That's right.
So my product gets lost. I can make my product the hero and I can tell them saying you can buy it from any of these. By the way, if I have deals with some of them or if, as you're saying, if someone else is having another deal, this is what I control. So second part, as a company that I find the advantage is today I do marketing spends, but the sales is happening elsewhere, and attribution becomes a huge challenge. But here you're building the entire attribution flow, so I can come back and say, okay, if both of your platforms, I'm the provider, and 80% of the customers are going to you and not to you, I can see how the marketing money is working.
Yeah, and I see this often. For example, when I'm searching for something, and I live in North Bangalore, when I search for something, I pretty much know that this particular, let's say, mobile phone that I'm buying. What if my battery conked off in my phone and I need a new replacement immediately? I can get a good deal online, but it's like a single day delivery or by evening. But little did I realize that there would be probably a local electronic store like a Chroma that can actually have it delivered in half an hour.
Half an hour,
Today,
that signal is not coming through for me.
And from a Chroma side, he's saying, I want to sell to you, I just can't reach you because you don't have an app.
So this is classic problem. And ONDC, if you go back to the history of ONDC, it was a conversation that started off in April 2020, right in the middle of pandemic. And the conversation we were having to get ONDC started was this. It's just a lockdown. All the immediately accessible inventory is in the Kirana stores. Not in the But yet, the fact that I am looking for a packet of bread, the neighborhood Kirana store doesn't know, and I don't know the fact that he has that inventory. It's a classic information asymmetry. The way we solve asymmetry is to put a guy in between to bring both.
Right.
Like you're creating a closed telephone exchange, an Airtel number to an Airtel number sort of a situation. What if that person in the middle is taken away and everybody is accessing that information? And then that's how innovation will take off. I mean, I keep taking this analogy, as funny as it seems. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but I think it's a point well made. If every automotive brand, let's say Ferrari wants to sell better cars, are they going to offer you a road? Or roads are common? Ferrari doesn't give you a designer road. It assumes there's a road. Roads are common. Roads are not private. Roads are not operating siloed. And it could be for a school bus, for a bicycle, or a Ferrari. But nobody's offering an exclusive road. So how you think about is use these roads, similarly in the world, in the digital world, as digital shared infrastructure on which you innovate more. You can have a better car, but doesn't mean that the better car needs a specially offered, curated better road. The roads are common. The roads generally has to be good for all, but that's the idea. And that is exactly solves for this information asymmetry between demand and supply signals and the efficiency that comes with it. And people will start innovating at those edges. Maybe if there is a common way where I can discover every Kirana store, maybe a guy in the remote will say, oh, listen, look at the heat map of all the searches happening on an open infrastructure.
Yeah.
Maybe I can set up a nearby warehouse.
Okay.
That makes the marketer say, you can stock your inventory here so your delivery is like Chrome or 15 minutes. You don't have to go set up, to your point, your own dedicated, close to the market warehouses. Maybe somebody else will show up and say, I can offer a low-cost warehouse for this particular catchment area. And that's pretty much how innovation and evolution will happen on this network. The purpose of this network, and to your point about what is the real value, the purpose of this network is to sort of democratize this way of signal generation and solving for the market, which has these information asymmetry barriers, which is the reason why we think e-commerce is not going beyond the creamy layer of the economic strata, those 100 million people who probably buy once in a year, to 300, 400 million people. And that's exactly what UPI solved for. It doesn't really matter where you have a bank account.
Correct.
It doesn't mean that you have to use the app of that bank.
Correct.
And then expect the other user to be also using something similar. It does, you can have 5 different bank accounts, all accessible on one app. It could be PhonePe, Google Pay, or any of them. And I can just send money to you without me knowing your bank account. I just need a number I can transfer. That way has enabled for UPI to now also solve for EMI collections.
Correct.
For Nammayatri, driver to pay the fees for Nammayatri, to use the app, it's a UPI collection. So that idea of, once you solve for this asymmetry, you will have whole new sorts of possibilities coming.
So you're actually changing the economics of this whole thing, right? Because
Yes.
today
If there are no economic incentives, I don't think, I mean, this is not just a social cost infrastructure.
What I meant is you're changing the economics of this right now. If I'm a small brand today and I want to reach out, I actually need to spend a lot of time listing with multiple players.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Or
And
create
there's
your own catalog.
Create my own catalog, maybe create my distribution. If I grow very large, either I go through one of their warehouses or I go through my own warehouse and so on. But now, because it's commons, in essence, you're making all of these commons.
Yes.
So my economics change.
Yes.
If this becomes as large as a UPI or an Aadhaar, what happens is I focus on what I do best.
Correct.
Which is running my business, and I rely as an open network of people who can help me, who do what they do best.
Yeah.
Right. So if there's someone who comes back and says, depending on demand supply signal, tomorrow there could be a player who comes back and says, I'm only into data analytics, and I will tell you, saying if she's a buyer, you're the seller.
Absolutely.
This is a warehouse that you should go and stock in, right?
Correct.
And there could be an insurance player who comes back and says, okay, for all this material over here, I will offer an insurance.
Yes.
So essentially, everyone gets to play to their strengths without having to worry about the other pieces.
That is correct. Yeah, absolutely. If everybody does their part right, instead of solving for the other parts.
Yes.
And that collective solving, we call it don't solve it yourself, distribute that ability to solve, where everybody does their part right, collectively are opening up in much bigger way. And that's pretty much how the technologies, ever since we had internet or any email, that's how technologies have been evolving. Create common infrastructure that allows everybody to solve one piece, and collectively you're solving for something bigger. And the Kirana store, just to give you an example of ONDC, we are doing financial services on ONDC, what are supposed to be purely commerce. Now, what does it mean for a Kirana store? Today, I don't have to depend on my wholesaler to give me a credit, right, to me to buy inventory. I can use my book of business of sales that is generated on an open infrastructure like ONDC, of course consent-driven, privacy controlled and all of that. But now, that 2 months of credit could come from someone else. It could be a financial service provider says, you seem like doing good amount of business. Your information has become like the collateral for me. I can dip into your sales as a way to collect my EMI payments.
Wow.
Instead of you waiting for the wholesaler retailer to give you 2 months credit.
Right.
It opens up options. Now, which means for the same amount of money, I can probably virtually stock more inventory in my small store. I can probably even get Nike shoes to be available through mine, whether I have space or not. It's about, I know the demand signal. I can do this. I just need more unlock through working capital and discover those catalogs out there and make it available for me. So I can become the portal for even a Nike to sell shoes in the local neighborhood rather than they setting up more and more warehouses.
Absolutely.
So that is the opportunity. I think it's a possibility for a country like India. It's too important to not try.
So
And that's
this
what ONDC is
also
trying to do.
opens up for possibilities of a lot of trade aggregators.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now
It
you
goes
could
deeper
be
and deeper into the value chain.
yeah,
You could
value
change
chain.
business
So it
in
could
the way
change
it's
the
done.
entire format of businesses and the whole of whether you are a branded or how do you, even if you are a branded aggregator, how do you open up other brand acquisitions without being really like a franchisee of
Yeah,
only one brand.
As
per
long as
se.
they permit, yeah.
Yeah,
Why
as
not?
long as
I
they
mean, actually, I'm
permit.
a big fan of all these platforms. I mean, for many people think that ONDC is anti-Amazon, anti-Uber. I believe that what seemed like today's problems with some of these problems were actually yesterday's solutions. I mean, we managed to crack how we can sell things online or move a taxi stand from the corner of a road into a mobile phone.
Yeah.
I think they were all pioneers of this.
Yeah.
The question we're asking is, how do we do it better for a larger audience? And doing better is always the pursuit.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I say this, because one of the things I always wanted to see sometime happening in ONDC is that there is this little thing called Amazon Fulfilled as an example. For me, I think I'm a believer of Amazon Fulfilled as a way of trust
Yes.
to get something from the seller on Amazon. I
Yeah.
think it's a beautiful thing that they created. The question I was asking is this: should Amazon Fulfill be available only on Amazon?
Amazon.
Can that be unbundled and be available for any DTC brand?
Yeah.
Look at the benefit Amazon Fulfill will make of their business outside of the marketplace, and the benefit other platforms will make, and how will it inspire many more Amazon Fulfill like
Providers.
trusted
Yeah,
providers
providers.
come. That's the evolution that will take a scale, that bring a scale for the kind of scale that India wants. This is what we're saying, which is one of the things we keep saying, is that if you want to solve for scale for India, and if you really want to know why UPI could do that or Aadhaar could do that to some extent, is to shift our thinking from scaling what works to what works at scale. And creating shared infrastructure, allowing for shared infrastructure to others to also innovate. So that we are not kind of coming to this, hitting this wall of saying only one player can do this very well.
Right.
If you can have multiplicity of that. And for me, an Amazon Fulfilled, being unbundled from Amazon to offer to anyone, and then creating a category of many such Amazon Fulfill like players coming for different contexts. Maybe it works differently for tier 3 cities. Maybe it works differently for agriculture. Maybe it works differently for food. But why should it be tightly coupled into a marketplace? Does one need each other? Yes, but doesn't mean that it's all done by
Controlled by one marketplace.
I think that unlocking is the value that hopefully ONDC envisions to achieve. And I don't think they're anywhere close to it. I mean, while it does 12 million transactions as of last month, which is a huge jump from where we were last year, I think it can be so much bigger.
So speaking of transactions,
Sure.
could you help us understand what could be the adoption rate, given that we've seen Aadhaar, UPI adopt so quickly, especially owing to pandemic also as
Sure.
one of the drivers. So in what sense do you think ONDC platform, when will it scale? Where is it currently? If you could give us a little bit of...
Yeah, so ONDC as an idea took its own seeds of germination, discussion, consultations. It was something that was an initiative taken off by the DPIIT as a government, but ONDC, it was a very conscious thought from government, and you have to commend their efforts. They wanted ONDC to be a market effort, and therefore they set up ONDC Limited as a market-facing private company, not government-owned, as a Section 8 company with private investments somewhere in December 2021. In fact, on 31st of December 2021,
Okay.
at the cusp of the turn of the
During
year.
the pandemic.
And I think our first transactions took off with volunteering first set of network participants as a cohort, I think in April 2022. And we were going slow. We thought, okay, we'll focus, because it's so counterintuitive as a way of thinking. I thought, let the idea sort of marinate well and see what works. So we were looking at a small pilot. So Bangalore was one city where we started pretty much in 2021, looking
Okay.
at retail, Kirana and restaurants, food, and the hyper-local logistics to go with it for the fulfillment part. And we were scaling up. It was doing pretty okay. Of course, if you were to keep the Namayatri aside, which is also independently scaling up with
Yeah.
Beckn protocol separately, we were by January 2023, I think we were looking at about 1,000 transactions a month.
Okay.
Because it was a mindset change.
That was 2 years since inception.
So I would say about a year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah, year and a half, I would say, because some of these would take a lot of understanding of how this works as a new way, because it's a multi-party, multi-platform transaction. It's not happening on one platform. So a lot of people, including the incumbents like Paytm and all the great companies, they also figuring out a way to do this outside of their own confines, right?
Right.
So all of this took time. So January 2023, just to give you some sense of numbers, we were doing about 1,000 transactions a month. Last month, July 2024, we were doing 12 million. And we went from Bangalore to 600 cities.
Okay.
We went from few hundred sellers to about close to 650,000 sellers. From just about 1,000 SKUs to some, I think, on top, higher order of 50 to 60 million SKUs. And that's outside of services. We're just talking about the retail and the restaurant. So it has been expanding. And expansion shows something, which means that the seller and buyer are coming back to use it again. It has become a way of things. It is it's definitely added to the optionality of saying, okay, being listed only on one marketplace or two, there is a real option for me to be as a seller. I am well represented where my catalogs can go to any consumer irrespective of which app they're using, to the other point we were speaking about. That sort of is the value that the sellers are seeing, and which is clearly seen by the auto rickshaw drivers and all of that, because they approached us with the idea. We didn't go to them, and that's how Namayatri took off. So some of this are sort of adding to the scale. I wouldn't be surprised if we hit the higher order of 30 to 50 million orders a month by end of this financial year. Looks like a fairly reasonable target to chase, and be operating in more than 1,000 cities.
Speaking of cities and the scale, generally in innovation and trend, we try to pick up geography signals of which city adapts more, faster, and all that. Could you give us a sense of geography across cities in India who are adapting faster, who are more receiving it better?
Sure. So clearly there is a certain habit of buying food online, buying grocery online, and it's more dominant in tier 1 than tier 2. So you're seeing similar trends with ONDC as well. So the big cities continue to be Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay. Of course, Bangalore taking a big share because this is where it started off. But like I said, there are 600 cities, and some of these categories, especially the categories where you have small industries, catalogs with no fixed MRP sort of products, like artisan products and all that, they're happening in other cities much bigger. I mean, you can order prasad, from Pune and have it delivered to Bangalore and things like that. All of that are actually happening on ONDC. People are actually doing that. So some of these, and agri-commerce is spread across multiple cities and towns. We have beggars creating artisan products and offering it on ONDC. There's an association that has come together and making it available from Varanasi for rest of India. So there is this, from this O to O, is happening across this very branded, structured, fixed MRP products to a much wider category, which was otherwise not available online. Those are coming up online. So each of this have their own individual behavior evolving. So ONDC is therefore a multi-category, sort of a city network where you have different cohorts getting catered. So I don't think there's only one pattern. But short answer is the big cities are anyway taking off, which was anyway predicted.
So this Varanasi piece, so these all seem like community-driven initiatives. Is this something that somebody from ONDC side is coming up with this ideas of what other use cases could be, and are you driving it impulsively, or is it well thought through, and
good question.
How does it come?
No, so ONDC is the reason of existence for ONDC as part of its envisioning document, and one of the strategy papers you'll find on the ONDC website is to take this way of doing online commerce to every small business.
Okay,
that's where the tagline is. Aapke liye desh khulega. It's not like you're opening up for the India will open up to you. So this is one of us saying that it's not about making small businesses internet friendly, but making internet small business friendly. That's what ONDC does. So therefore they had this notion of a developmental role where they want to make access to commerce, access to markets as low as possible for every form of a business or an enterprise or a community, and therefore with that development focus they do run the campaigns, they engage with that community. There are a lot of philanthropic funds and government subsidy programs that are also nurturing this, but the fact is that despite how much they could do, and there's so much more they can do, there is a natural recognition for this way of doing commerce online, for be it the Kudumbashree workers in Kerala or these little communities in Varanasi and other places. They see that naturally makes sense, because I'm not, in their view, not being hostage to one platform, but I can use any platform to find any customer on anywhere in another part of the world, and therefore my cost of doing business online is so much more lesser. So there is a motivation to make it democratic, solve for the inequities of access to commerce, online commerce, and that is one of the stated ambitions or goals of ONDC. So they're taking very deliberate efforts on that front.
So if I had to ask you, you said the underlying protocol is Beckn.
Yes.
Does Beckn work only for commerce, or are there other use cases as well?
Yeah, so it's funny, when Nandan, Pramod and I started sitting together, the problem that we were trying to solve, of course we wanted to solve for scale, as a complex societal problem. We thought, let's solve for urban mobility or transport, because half of the world is going to live in urban, and we live in Bangalore, so we understand the pains of local mobility challenges that we have. So we said, how do we not create another aggregator, but unify all the forms of transport that are there? The question is, how do I go from point A to point B, not about which form of transport. Absolutely, right? So go from form centric to actually being consumer centric. So it started off in mobility, and it is. So we discovered the deeper truth in the design. When we started writing the standards for that, we realized that, oh, by the way, it can cater to logistics because they're very adjacent. Then I said, okay, what if that inventory was more stable like a Kirana store? So that's how it evolved. today, I think it's become more universal, more general, but exhaustive for any sort of an economic resource. So I see commerce to be a collection of economic resources on retail, goods and services, mobility included, but it can now, as we are saying, it finds its way for adoption in space of energy as an economic resource, skilling as an economic resource, a doctor's calendar for teleconsultation as an economic resource. So therefore, it is multi-domain, sector agnostic sort of a play, and that's what Beckn, beyond ONDC, is seeing a lot of adoption in energy, skilling, agriculture, and even outside of India. So we have similar networks like ONDC in Amsterdam, Belém in Brazil, Gambia, Kenya. Kenya is primarily focused on agriculture. So it's become a universal transaction web protocol for any economic resource.
Help me understand this. What would I build on in the energy space on top of Beckn?
So energy is interesting because we don't have big platforms like the marketplaces when it comes to EV charging, for example. EV charging from get-go has been like several platforms. So today, I think India boasts about 70 to 80 different charging point operators with their own platforms. Now imagine if you buy an EV car and you're getting out of Bangalore to a long drive, you're figuring out, okay, with the range anxiety kicking in, you're saying, okay, where can I find the next EV charger? But then the question shifts from range anxiety to discovery anxiety. We're saying, oh, which app do I download to discover the next charger? With Beckn, from the dashboard of your car, hopefully in future, or from your regular WhatsApp-like usage, you can discover any EV charger of any operator without having to download their app.
Or even on Google Maps, like how you find the
That's
next
correct.
petrol pump.
Yes. You can find, by the way, on Google, you can find the EV chargers. Now, it's not just finding. With Beckn, you can actually buy energy, which
Right.
means I can say I need 5 kilowatt hour or 60 kilometers worth of battery charge to be available. I don't have to download their app, put money there to make the payment. I can do it from confines of WhatsApp or any other app. And all I have to do is just, of course, go there and plug in the gun for charging, but everything else is on my app. I don't have to download this 50 different apps. How does it help the charging point operator? They are actually setting up these costly chargers. It's huge amount of patient capital going into this with very low utilizations on one hand, because there's not much of EV adoption happening anyway, and also waiting for consumer to download their app to get going.
Right.
Now you don't have to, they don't have to worry about it. So it's a win-win for both sides, which is why we have close to about 10 to 15,000 transactions of EV charging already happening on Beckn protocol.
Okay.
And there's a market alliance that is coming together to promote this way of thinking. And we're not just solving for EV charging. Now it's getting into finding idle batteries,
Right.
storing energy. So that I can find a low-cost storage for energy that is coming from my rooftop. Whether I'm a company or an individual, I can use energy later, so I need storage. The cost of storage can come from an idle school bus, which has only 2 runs in the day, but has a big battery inside that I can probably monetize. The school bus makes money. I can find cheaper batteries. So there are combinatorial possibilities. It's fascinating how things are evolving on the energy side, but very clearly all of this are Beckn use cases. Yeah.
Tell me something. Now, these brands who provide such energies or electric charges itself, they would thrive on data,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Now, the point I'm trying to come to is, if you are going to decentralize
Yeah.
the data, where one brand doesn't know the consumer going where, what are they doing, how they're going to do it. Tell us a little bit about data management. And you also said the consumer now feels this is my app, instead of me going to other apps. We touched base upon this earlier in the podcast. So what is the connection between data, security, and privacy?
The value of data for me is that more business, or it protects my business at best and enhances my business. So way an open network solves for is that I have access to demand signals irrespective of where it comes from. That's the data I have. So for example, if I log in, if I'm a nationwide EV charging operator, what is the cost of me knowing who is searching for EV charger in which pin code?
Right.
That data is premium and costly today.
Yeah.
But just log into the network, I can see the search coming from all over the country on one network. Because the search is democratized with ONDC or with an EV charging or a UEI network, which is a bit like ONDC for energy. So my cost of discovery of demand goes down. That's the data that I access, right? Second is, for the people who are actually doing business with me, I get to keep that data. So how much business is coming to me is only between my platform and the user on the other side, that platform, right? So the user's platform, so all transactions on Beckn are bilateral.
Okay.
For example, we are all on, say, one big telecommunication network of networks between Airtel and Vodafone, but what I spoke to you on my number to your number remains with us. Maybe a little bit of the CDR remains with the telecom company, but it's always at the edges. It's never, so ONDC does not capture data, your transaction. ONDC does not even know the transactions are happening. It's totally decentralized. Same with energy. So I protect my business. My book of business is with me. Now my book of business has come from 15 customers on platform A, 20 customers on platform B. They only see some part of my business, but my complete book of business remains with me. So by design, my competitive data remains confidential.
I just want to draw one analogy between Google search and ONDC search,
Sure.
given what you just spoke. So today brands know that on Google search in this location, somebody searched or this volume of searches will happen, and that's how the commerce within Google works, right? Now ONDC has a good cause of socially liberating all these, but what does it mean in terms of search volumes, or how do brands get to know where of which product discovery, which one? So how do they get access to that analytics from ONDC? An equivalent of Google search analytics.
Very good. So what you'll see very soon, ONDC will be announcing is a lot of this as open data.
Okay.
Okay. So if you're and that's for people who are not connected to ONDC. For example, if you're not a platform connected to ONDC, how do you get the larger data? Because we think, just like how we get the UPI numbers and GSTN numbers, I think we should share who is searching for what on ONDC for the benefit of all, including those who are outside of the network. But if you're on the network, by the fact that you are saying I'm a retail company trying to make retail goods and services available, every search for anybody will come to you. So you will get to see that visibility. So it's not like, if Google were to search, maybe Google probably alone knows. I get to see some part of it as part of a search listing. But if I am on the network, I will get to see all that is happening. So, in fact, I keep telling them, some of the big FMCG companies probably can just take value by just coming onto the network and simply listening.
Yeah.
It's a listening network as well. It's not just a transaction network. But the fact that who's shopping where, and I can say who's searching for what. Is they searching by a specific competitor's brand, or are they searching for shampoo, are they searching for Sunsilk shampoo? All of that will open up at some point.
So in a sense, in future will we have like how Perplexity AI has its own SEO optimization, how Google has its own SEO?
I think so.
Will ONGC also become a search platform?
It will. I think those are the innovations that I think ONDC will push for. So ONDC is an ecosystem approach.
Right.
It is not ONDC will do the search engine optimization because they don't even operate the network. They're called the orchestrator of the network.
Right.
They don't even operate any piece of this network. What they want is there are innovators, just like how innovators figured out SEO outside of Google. There will be players who will do SEO for
this
ONDC
network.
searches, which are for economic transactions, for economic goods and services. That will happen. In fact, some of this is happening not so much on the search side, but on the reputation side. So just to give you an example of what's happening today, if you're a seller on a platform, a seller gets you to hold a rating, right? Either it's user-defined rating or some algorithm kicks in along with the user feedback and say, okay, you're between 3 and 5. And that is your only currency today, right? If you want to be up in the pecking order, that number matters, right? I mean, you've seen drivers say, please give me a good rating. And all that. One of the things is that rating is native to that platform, native to your tenancy on that platform. With ONDC, you can take your ratings to any platform.
Okay.
And that is a network level, not at a platform level. So we are making the rating portable and interoperable. Now, we are extending that thought and says, why should it be a rating? It could be rating type, rating like. For example, there could be badges. I maintain my car well, or I'm a great green, energy provider. I can have badges given by third party. An insurance company can give me a badge. So I can accumulate more than one form of rating to make myself more appealing for the end user.
Yeah.
Which means it's not tied to the platform host to give me that rating. I can have 10 players. So now with ONDC, you will see a whole reputation market opening up on top of ONDC because it's open, right? It's like internet. Similarly, taking that same thinking, I see an SEO market opening up on one side and many other such markets opening up. So that's one way to look at what the possibilities are with ONDC.
So Sujith, with all the conversations that we've had, do you think this ONDC is geared towards a socialist story, especially when you're talking so much about commerce? Is there a socialist angle to it?
I feel, on the contrary, it's actually more progressive capitalism than socialism. Of course, we are a welfare state and we have mouths to feed. We have 1.4 billion people. Our per capita is probably that lower than that of Sub-Sahara, although we are the 5th largest economy. So we do have to solve for inclusion, access, equity, address some of these unfreedoms that exist. But that said, that is also the market opportunity. It is not something that a Samaj or a Sarkar can alone solve. It is as much a bazaar opportunity as much as a Samaj and Sarkar. And I think ONDC is unlocking those market animal spirits and making it better for markets to perform better, market players to access much wider audience that India offers, and figure out, it's like one of those things, right? Are you selling big shampoo bottles which big buyers will buy, but somebody figured out India is a sachetized shampoo packet. How do we sachetize commerce that it reaches everyone and makes it everybody, and expanding the pie? And as I was saying earlier, it's not about getting a 50% market share in a 100 rupee market. It's about getting even 10% in a 100,000 market, makes a much bigger deal for everyone. It unlocks new forms of innovation which are more India-centric. When I say India-centric, not the top layer of Indian economic strata, but India 2, India 3, as we call it. And that for me is a market story. And as much as government support on ONDC solving for access to everyone does have that welfare or a social touch, it is for the market to grab this and go make it bigger and bigger. I mean, like how fintech is benefiting from UPI today. Yeah.
So tell me something. There's a recent photograph I saw on LinkedIn where just a couple of BSNL employees had come together and launched the 5G piece. Okay, it was a pretty, not a very glamorous event if in comparison to a corporate event. So tell me something, how ONDC or this initiative will keep up the glamorous spirit of that this is a government initiative powering for the country. And how do, in a couple of years, how do you see whether, this will still stay abreast, or how do you see the evolution?
Yeah, it will. For example, one of the biggest barriers for any sort of digital freedom has been the barriers of language. India's go-between language has always been English, right, in the digital world. But now if you have to reach from, say, 100 million to 600 million, 700 million, you need a language native commerce, which, for example, if I can order in Gujarati and somebody picking up the order in Tamil, we don't have that sort of an interoperability as much as the society has it in the physical world. A lot of this AI-led will have that sort of use cases which are more inclusive, overcoming the language divide in the digital arena. So some of that ONDC will adopt. Imagine ONDC will get a shot in the arm with such kind of language infrastructure with AI, solving for ONDC. And the benefit is, if ONDC solves for it, every node on the edge gets to benefit from that.
Yeah, but tell me something where the agility that private players have
Sure.
versus how long can a government be an ambassador of such a network?
The purpose of solving for inclusion and access and equity is something more of a conviction and design. But the effort of uptake and the opportunity and incentive for that will come from the market. I don't see government or ONDC itself being an e-commerce company.
Right,
It will not
that's a
be,
given.
it cannot.
Yeah, that's a given.
And therefore, if it does not create cost curve declines for a social media influencer to influence better on purchasing decisions, or for an FMCG brand to reach to newer cohorts for their products and newer regions, or for a tech company building a consumer app to say, how do I increase customer lifetime value? It has to tick all those boxes, and that's exactly what ONDC intends to do. It is to make their success a bigger success rather than making it my success.
Fair enough. And given that you've had in 1.5 years you've had 12 million transactions.
A month.
A month.
Yeah.
A month.
As of last month.
As of last month. Okay. So give us an understanding of any of the market players have already adopted that we are not aware of, or yet to be
Sure.
aware of.
Yeah, so we have all the big names like Paytm, PinCode, which is the app that PhonePe has launched for commerce. We have Ola offering food services on ONDC, and Ola also offers Ola Electric Logistics, which is one of the cheapest logistic hyperlocal service in India cost-wise, and it's available, I think, exclusively on ONDC. So if you
Okay.
want to access the lowest, cheapest hyperlocal logistic as a food delivery company, it's there on ONDC. So
Oh, this is why I saw a picture where there was, such a price difference, almost 2 times between Ola Foods versus Swiggy and Zomato. Is that the
It's
reason?
one of the things, yes. And I see this nexus of green, which is electric, sustainability, and digital, coming out in a big way, and it'll get amplified in ONDC more than anywhere else. So and then the other brands, Snapdeal is on ONDC for sure. Google is joining pretty soon. I think they probably make an announcement in 1 or 2 months or earlier. We have other big service providers, big brands are coming on. I think HUL is pretty much locked in. ITC is coming in. My sense is, I think there are, just by a platform count, we're not talking about a few more hundreds joining the existing 100. We're talking about a few tens of thousands in pipeline to join the network. And,
Right.
and all of them will solve for one thing very well. And even to the aspect that, all of these big FMCG companies, they were pushing these apps for Kirana store to make them better do online. Imagine now, Kirana guy has an app which caters to not just that particular brand of products from that FMCG company, but the whole of
Yeah,
Kirana.
yeah.
And that is also now coming up in a big way, which is supported by some of these FMCG
Yeah, yeah.
companies. So opening up of this design is like the 91 era of opening up the economy.
Yeah.
ONDC is opening up commerce
Yeah.
and trying to create that sort of first order, second order revolution. And big brands are already seeing it to some extent, and they're coming in, they're doubling up their efforts. And we see many more such brands coming and doing this, including hospitality, tourism. We'll see some big names coming in very quickly.
So you're growing at such a pace. What challenges do you see?
Yeah, so I think when you talk about pace of growth is happening at a very, very small base right now. I mean, 12 million transactions a month is, I think, several orders lower than what some of the big platforms would have done. I mean, of course, they've had the journey with a head start of 10, 15 years.
Yeah, but your
Obviously.
vision is to bring a lot many more
Yes.
people, right? And now you'll have a lot more voices on that, a lot more opinions.
So one challenge is that I think we are just getting started, and how do we start think of bigger and bigger scale in the order of tens if not hundreds from now, and that is thinking not just for ONDC as a company, for even the market players to say how do I scale my business on this. But that also means several unlocks in their mind, the mindset, right? For example, it's not a platform, it's a network, it's an open network. I can be a node, autonomous node without being under control of some other party. It is not some government is controlling this. In fact, it's more of a market, pro-capitalist and not a socialist effort. At the stage that capitalism with a sense of inclusion and taking care of the welfare of small businesses, all of that requires a mindset change. And it was one of those things. If you tell me that scanning a QR code can make you transfer money to the other person at a shop, Kirana store, and therefore you should have a Kirana, it did not take off naturally, right? We said, where is the POS machine where I can tap? As a Uber urban customer, you're looking for a credit card machine to top. And then said, oh, why aren't we, India is so bad? In fact, India's payments were much slower than what a Portugal would have done, as big as a country as we are. Because we said, okay, now, does it mean that every Kirana store will buy a big,
POS
clunky
machine,
POS machine? How did we change that? We changed that by saying instead of 60 million POS machines, India went on to 60 million QR codes. And suddenly payments became everywhere. Every surface is like a QR code, you can make a payment and get done. So ONDC will also go through that. And once that technology meets society, rather than society meeting technology, that's the thing. And one of the big things that you can expect is this ONDC QR code, which is going to be a very, very powerful way of going from O to O very quickly. And O to O not just on the Kirana merchant side of going online very quickly, a customer buying online, but on the how do you convert your advertising spends into actual business for your distribution. Your distribution can meet leads much more quickly with your advertising space. No change in your advertising space. You're not adding up to that with just this little idea of QR codes. I see that to be a portal from physical to digital on ONDC. Those are all going to make this go much bigger.
So all of this sounds very nice, right? The opportunities is nice, optimistic view, bright and all. Any risks, dark side of this tech, responsibility, ethicals, any of those?
Yeah, so once this becomes big, and one of the things about big is that it becomes too big to fail. So we don't want a situation where this becomes a very, very big or a default infrastructure and then the controls remain with a few big players in the market. So how do we create more options on every edge, whether it's on the consumer side, the demand side, supply chain side? I would ideally believe we should have a good number of multiplayer ecosystem in each of these legs and not one player doing this. The second part is, at the end of the day, what are we trying to solve? It has to assure enough trust, not just to the businesses and the platforms on the network, but to actually the end users, the real consumer and the real small business who's setting up a shop or a restaurant. And for that, many other things have to fall in place, which is trust, governance, dispute resolution, reputation, grievance handling. All of that has to work, and that's as much as it's a daunting effort. ONDC has been skillfully doing that. Not by saying, I will be the adjudicator or the judge of grievance or dispute, rather saying, can we create an ecosystem that is independent, but many who can solve for some of these edge cases. So a lot of ODR players, ODR stands for online dispute resolution, reputation players, create that, and that is also the necessary piece. So those are necessary to solve for risk and governance issues. It should scale just as fast as the network is scaling, and that's one thing that ONDC is very conscious about. But we have to solve for those too. It's not just going to be a completely an open market with no questions of checks and balances and guardrails. So this guardrails
you definitely can't have that.
It also requires a little bit of a regulatory support. So some conversations on the consumer affairs policies and all of that, sort of making them imagine that a marketplace is not always a central platform. It is more than that. It could be also a network on which you can think of it differently. All of that unlocks need to happen, but those are all deliberations that are happening, and hopefully they will all find way into the mainstream adoption at scale.
Given all of this, what do you see as the future of commerce?
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, I'm not a retail or a commerce expert. I'm just, as I was saying, Beckn just flowed into this. I'm learning about this. But one of the things I've been noticing about commerce is that it's not one way or one category. As we're saying, immediate rapid emergence of this quick commerce, conversational commerce, and new forms of commerce engaging with, we had omni-channel and all of that as constantly evolving space. I think that evolution will be far more rapid and greater. With ONDC, I think there are some very different, interesting combinatorial categories that may come up, which may combine some of these trends and create new trends. Some of these are unforeseeable today, but I see that how you couldn't unforesee a ChatGPT coming out of internet. ONDC can create many such unforeseeable ways, and it will increasingly demonstrate value to a hyper-connected consumer or a hyper-connected seller that India would have in very different. So I think that evolution will be quite conspicuous and too important to not notice. And ONDC will start probably setting up some new trends, hopefully, in the future. That couldn't have happened without ONDC outside of ONDC. So that's what I'm hopeful about, because that's the whole point of the spirit of innovation that ONDC wants to nurture as an ecosystem and not for itself.
Okay.
Well, I would say, I think I'd love to see a few things. I think
Sure.
one, having these artisans prepare stuff or stuff that's available anywhere,
right.
and they're focusing on what they do best and just saying, hey, I don't need to spend effort in finding customers. Customers will find me no matter which platform they
Yeah.
are, right? I think all of us would benefit from that.
And one more maybe takeaway for our audience is if any brand wants to now switch their platform or come also onto ONDC, what are some of the steps they can take? What transactionally
Sure.
what they need to be prepared for, and what's the protocol like?
So one, I think getting onto ONDC does not mean giving up on what they're doing already.
Okay.
It's a plus one to what they're doing. It's an access to a more cheaper, better distribution infrastructure. Think of ONDC as another distribution channel that you're using if you're a provider of goods and services or a catalog. That's how you should look at it. It's an option that amplifies your game, your strategy, more than something that is a switch from option A to option B. To get onto that, today there are enough and more ONDC aware, companies which can get your business onto ONDC very quickly.
Okay.
So at least the tech side of it, the tech plumbing side of it, there are enough players who will do the job for you. I mean, this is going back to the time when if you're trying to sell online, you have to figure out how to collect payments yourself, receive the payments and facilitate electronic payment transactions, to now saying, I have enough and more payment gateways or processors who I can integrate with to solve for it. It's not a problem that I have to solve, it's already solved
So
for.
if I am a D2C brand,
Yeah.
what do I do? Do I go onto
Great question.
ONDC website, register myself, and then take it up from there, or how do I kickstart?
If you're a D2C brand, the chances are you may be running your own sort of an online platform on which you're making your catalogs available primarily, in addition to making it available on Amazon and Flipkart and Myntra kind of places. You will just make that platform available on ONDC too. It means a very, very small tech plumbing effort, and there are enough players who can make it plug and play for you. So the tech part is actually low cost, effective and fast.
Okay.
And then from your business and marketing angle, just like how you're saying, I do business through third-party channels, third-party marketplaces, think of ONDC as a virtual network where you're getting customers from third-party platforms. We're calling them the buyer platforms. It could be from a Paytm customer or from an else, but you have a way to listen to who's searching for what and what are they looking for to actually receiving those orders and fulfilling them. So for them, it doesn't really change much, which is what is important about ONDC. ONDC is not a big leap. It is pretty much doing what you're doing today, but doing it a little bit more
So
for
simply
ONDC.
put, as a D2C brand, I need to find a person who can get me onto the ONDC network and get the plug and play done.
If you have a tech and product team, you can do it yourself. It's pretty
Okay.
straightforward. Yeah.
Okay. So rest of it remains the same. So.
That is right.
Oh.
Of course, joining ONDC, you can join as a seller, you can join as a platform yourself. Those are choices that you can evaluate and strategically choose, and ONDC team can walk them through. Enough details are there on the website. There are a lot of learning material there. There are a lot of videos available. There is an ONDC Academy where you can learn some of this very quickly, at least the team. So there are enough resources available to figure it out, but joining should not be as difficult as it may sound when you look at, okay, it's a network, not a platform. It looks complicated, but it's not.
Great. I think this was a fantastic conversation. There's a lot we learned.
Yeah.
A lot to
Likewise.
look forward to
Yeah.
if this really picks up.
Yeah.
I
And
can
how
see a
it
huge
plays
shift.
out in the coming years.
I can see a huge shift in how people do business, how people look at economies, what they focus on, and I
And
think all of us will
consumers-
benefit
consumers
as consumers.
purchase the product.
All of us
Product
benefit
is
as consumers.
Yeah.
Yes, no, absolutely. Even I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and the promise of ONDC is something that I thought the audience would love to see. Of course, getting it there will require many hurdles and barriers to be crossed, but their opportunities are much bigger. Even ONDC is sort of expanding on its ambition. It's not just confined for domestic trade. It's looking at how do we expand for export-import.
Right.
We did a trial transaction. There's so much more that will happen on this, but it is not just for one ONDC or the network itself to figure out. I mean, network is only as good as the adoption it gets. So an adoption is where the innovators, solvers, providers, all of them have to come together. It's a long journey, but it's a great start. I think we've been doing well, but it's just the beginning, and there's so much more to solve for. It's not going to be easy. It's counterintuitive to the conventional way of looking at commerce. But I think India has been taking these big bets and trying to come out well towards it. It may probably take 5 years or a decade, but I thought it was something which is too important to not try.
Yeah. And something to look forward to after
Definitely.
next UPI, right? So
Yeah,
thanks
that's
for
right.
joining us, and wonderful session.
Thank
you.
you. Thanks for
Thank you so
having
much,
me.
Sujith.
Great conversation. Thank you.